March Madness begins this week with college basketball brackets and schedules set. Joining us with more on the streaming and the money to be made, Patrick Rishe, Director of Sports Business Program at Washington University St. Louis and founder and CEO of Sportsimpacts. And for one of the first years ever, I'm kind of dreading even trying to do the brackets, Patrick. I'm really not sure why. I guess because I know from the last couple of weeks that I can't possibly pick who's going to cover and who's going to win. It's just on any given night, it's impossible. What happened to Houston, Iowa State? What was that? Can you tell me?
Yeah, there were a lot of surprises and a lot of teams on that bubble on the men's side that were very disappointed that they didn't get in, Joe. But, you know, this year, and you alluded to this a little bit in your opening statement, Joe, is we don't have brand identities on the men's side anymore because of the one and done. And you juxtapose that with what's going to happen this year for the women's tournament, where you've got these wonderful stories. Undefeated South Carolina, their recent clash, literally and physically, with LSU, the defending champion. Of course, Caitlin Clark factor. Last year, the men's finals rating between UConn and San Diego State was the lowest that they had seen in forever, 14.7 million. The women's final on ABC was 9.9 million. This could be the first year, depending upon how things play out, Joe, that you could actually see higher ratings for the women's final than the men's, and it's all about branding. We don't know the men's. It's a revolving door, but when these ladies are with their teams for 3-4 seasons, that is a big factor in the branding aspect of women's basketball right now. Even
coaches' sons, or not, I haven't seen it with Donna, but a coach's son might leave after 1 year. It's Juwan Howard. So that's a point I hadn't even thought of. So when you're there for a year and then you go off to the NBA, you don't have the chance to have that, that kind of star power in the March Madness.
Not to mention the gelling of the team.
Right.
Well, and I was thinking before I went on this morning, two things. One, go back to my youth up in good old Potsdam, New York in the 80s, and everybody loved the Big East basketball. Syracuse, I can tell you names of guys that played on those teams because they were there for 3 or 4 years. And the Patrick Ewing, Georgetown Hoyas, and all these great stories, St. John's, Chris Mullins, those guys played 3 and 4 years. Your show, if you had revolving cast of characters every single day, every single week, you would not have the same brand. But in women's basketball, and part of this is the WNBA requires these players to play and stay for 4 years. Now, that could be challenged at some point down the road legally. We'll see what happens there. But that forces these young women to go ahead and play 3 or 4 years. And by the way, because of name, image, and likeness, why would they leave? Because now the best players, like the Caitlin Clarks and the Juju Watkins, they can make 6-7 figures in nil earnings before they go pro.
I really like that analogy you use.
Well, it's true. I mean, you think
about us, so
well, it's hard to gel when you're constantly swapping out.
But you would keep, if you were CNBC, you think they should, otherwise we'd be like CNN on that morning show. Why? Who's on that one? Does anybody know?
Patrick, did you move? Are you still an Indian?
No, I moved.
Got another great backdrop.
Spring
whose house was that?
Spring break is.
Whose house was that?
This is my house, Joe.
Whose house was that?
Anybody's house
in
this morning,
Indian
I
Wells. You never came clean. Whose house that was?
He said it was family.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to now.
Family.
Spring break is over, so unfortunately, I've got to get back to work. The final 6 weeks grinding it out at WashU St. Louis. Look, really excited for the rest of the semester.
What is every game's going to be? I could already. Okay, we had the TNT, TBS, some station I never remember how we did that in recent years. There were
True TV. You're probably thinking of
True TV. We had all the. So how does streaming change? Where we're going to find? There's not a single game that's not going to be on, is there?
You can't handle the True TV. Sorry, I had to do that. Look, the streaming is going to be more popular than ever before. We're seeing that trend across all of sports. Of course, the other part of this, Joe and Becky, I think is going to be fascinating, is the gambling piece. The American Gaming Association is estimating roughly $3 billion is going to be bet on this year's March Madness. And again, as you know, I think, quite frankly, when it comes back to this popularity and comparing the men's and women's games, the only reason why the men's games are going to get some of the ratings they'll get is the gambling piece. There's more gambling on women's basketball, but it's more about the familiarity of the brands, as we said before, because they've been there for 3-4 years.
When you can see, what is it, a 16 beat or a 15 beat, it's impossible.
I'm filling out my bracket right now.
I don't even
Well,
want to
a part of this goes back to the one and done. When you have some of these smaller schools, when you go back to some of these smaller schools where I'm going to be filling those out all day today, Becky. When you go back to the smaller schools where their players have been together for 2, 3, maybe 4 years, this is part of the reason why these 15, 16 seeds sometimes jump up and get some of these. Exactly.
There is something to be said for the teamwork and playing together, and you know this if you're on a business team, if you're on a sports team. I watch it with my son's teams, the teams that you play with for a while.
You have Gonzaga there. I saw a guy on TV yesterday. One of the main guys said, "I like McNeese." He said, "I think McNeese." Said, so how can I possibly?
It's possible.
But Gonzaga had, 24?
McNeese is 30 to 3. But
how many tournaments is this for Gonzaga? Is it like 24 straight or something? I mean, that is crazy. That Gonzaga.
That's another story. Just real briefly on Gonzaga. What a great story, and they've been able over the last 20 years to basically put a school on the map because of college sports.